Do you think this is a game only for the rich?
Unfortunately, yes, it is.
You have a biological test if you have 56 years of age, but you have a 30 years old brain.
Yeah, that's right. So when you start to have information about your own mortality and pace of aging, it starts to make you think differently about how you live your life.
How do you think people need a longevity when it's requiring sacrificing their pleasure from a young age?
And there are 35% of every population where they decide to make pretty bad choices. The human body is amazing. What you can do over a period of time as you build and train is incredible. The longevity industry is starting to happen. We've got Bryan, Kim Kardashian.
What can people do with an average income?
So they can start with knowledge, not just in the way you feel, but you've actually got data. You can actually start to see the benefit of them.
So when you get old, you just implant a new organ.
Phil Newman.
Phil Newman, the CEO and founder of Longevity.Technology, senior level marketer, cyclist, and swimmer renowned for his work in driving innovations that enhance human health span. He's here to help you live a longer and healthier life.
Hi Phil, welcome to How Many Zeros? You have a biological test if you have 56 years of age, but you have a 30 years old brain. Which test did you take to determine this?
So I went to a clinic, to the Longevity Center in Warsaw. Lots of very talented clinicians. They put me through all sorts of tests. I did do a psychological test, which I'm sure was part of the assessment of my brain age. You'll find as we go through our conversation that I put my hands into the experts, right? So the experts are the ones that understand a lot of the deep science associated with the space. So if they tell me that my brain age is 30, that's good enough for me.
And your wife also took that test as well?
No, she didn't do that test. She's actually somebody that I really want to get into going to the clinics. My wife and I are very different personalities. I love my sport, I love traveling, I love exploring new things, whereas my wife is just a little bit more relaxed about those things. But we have done biological age tests. It's an emerging science. So this whole concept of age and measuring age is still emerging. There's not a gold standard for it yet, which is like any industry. So every industry goes through its growth phases, and the longevity space is very much doing that.
But you stated that she is actually 18 years older than you, biologically.
Yep. So we both did the True Diagnostic test, which is a very popular test at the moment. It's used, for example, the Rejuvenation Olympics, which people are using to track their biological ages. And obviously, if somebody has a slower pace of aging, so for every 1 year that you live, if you're actually aging slower than that, then of course you're going to be in a position where you are going to have a longer life. But of course you want to understand whether you're going to have a healthier life as well. Now, I'm 57 now. I took the test when I was, I think, 56. But at the time it was quite shocking because I was biologically 8 years younger, according to the test. And my wife, who's the same chronological age as me, she was 10 years older. So that was an 18-year difference between us, which of course is quite an interesting perspective on life when you think about your life partner. My wife and I have been married for a very long time, and we're great friends still, and I want that to continue as long as possible. So when you start to have information about your own mortality and your own pace of aging, it starts to make you think differently about how you live your life.
And there is a very interesting picture of you being a rock star back in the 1980s. It's difficult for me to reconcile that image of you being a rock star and currently in the longevity field. What transits you?
Being in a band in the 80s was really good fun. There's a joke that says, what do you call somebody who hangs around with musicians? And the answer is a drummer. Because drummers aren't great musicians, but they're solid and they're reliable and they're a bit mad. And I think that that's probably my personality type as well. I'm now a CEO hanging around with lots of other amazing people, whether they're scientists, great entrepreneurs, really big investors. And I see my role really as an editor of a leading publication in the space now, of keeping the rhythm of the industry. So, we publish at least 2 articles a day on news and 5 articles a day on lifestyle. And we keep that rhythm going in the industry all the time. Now, it was hard at the beginning. We had very few readers, but now we have 5 million readers around the world. And that's because we're building a solid business. That's the analogy that I'd say. As a drummer, you're not necessarily always in the front line, but you're there to keep everything going. And that's kind of my role, I feel, in the industry.
Yeah, I see. But from a drummer rock band, and consultant, and then a CEO of Longevity.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when I was 16, I was at college and I was in a band, and I got the opportunity to go professional when I was 17. But my father, who was a great mentor to me, said, "You're grown up, it's your choice." So I had a choice of going into music professionally or to continue with my education. And I actually decided to continue with my education at that point. And he said, when you leave this course, you can go and start your own company. And that's exactly what I did. So when I was 19, I left college, went straight into running my own company. And I grew it until the end of the dot-com period.
What were the major setbacks that you had when you at your first entrepreneur journey?
Well, I was always talented at design and communication. And I ran a business as a young person. You get lots of experience running a business, you know, whether you're a young person or a mature person, right? So I was very good at assimilating the experiences that I had and reapplying that knowledge into never making the same mistakes again. So yeah, I grew a business to be quite successful, you know, got my first employees.
What was it about?
So I was running an ad agency back in the 80s and 90s. It was obviously pre-internet, which sounds like a very old world now. Yeah. But when the internet happened, for me, it was like, wow, this is going to change the world. And I was a very early adopter of internet technology. We ran a very successful business in the 90s as every company was starting to think we need to be online, you know. So yeah, and of course that grew and grew. As the dot-com period really started to take off, it was a very successful business.
So every time when you see there is a renovation and you just jump in, so you take it as an opportunity instead of seeing it as a risk?
Well, I used to jump in when I was younger. And as I got older, I realized I had to be more measured about my jumping, right? Part of my interest in longevity came from the fact that I was actually looking for a new industry to put my talents into. So I had worked in Internet of Things as an industry. Before it became Internet of Things, it was called Machine to Machine when I was in it. And I was too early then. We tried to fund the company in California to Series A. We couldn't get it funded at Series A, so we had to close that company. 10 years later, that technology was being used all around the world. So I learned then that actually we were too early with that technology. Since that period of time, I was then very clear that I wanted to always work in America. So even though I was based in the UK, I always used to work with companies that were expanding and had technology that could succeed in the US marketplace.
So it could be succeed if you stick it to longer.
Yes. The problem is money, right? You might have a really great idea, but if people aren't ready to either fund that idea as investors to succeed, to help you cross the chasm and become successful as a business, you need customers that are going to buy your products.
Yeah.
So if you don't have either of those things, then you're not going to be in business. And that's a result of sometimes being too early. Sometimes you can be too late, right? And then, of course, everybody's doing it. Longevity, when I came into the industry in 2018, was something that I was specifically looking for, a new industry that I could bring my skills to and be very much part of at the formation of the industry. So that's when I found about longevity. I was doing that 500-kilometer bike ride in Norway. I was reading an article before the race started about a company called Juvenescence. They'd raised 50 million pounds, I think it was, maybe dollars. That was my first exposure to the concept of anti-aging therapeutics and the longevity industry. I didn't just jump in, I did some research then, and I looked at the industry. I could see that there was some great work happening in the space. There were some very gifted people dedicating their lives to the industry. Yeah. And I felt as a professional communicator that I could bring something to it and form a role for myself in the industry. So that's when I launched Longevity.Technology. I had run a successful consulting business.
Is it also related with longevity?
Completely different. I was working with clients from large Japanese corporations to startups, helping them with their marketing and commercialization. And I decided to employ some staff, take some offices, and dedicate a team to building Longevity.Technology. So we started in 2018, and then I launched in September 2019.
I see.
Yeah.
And speaking of longevity, I couldn't think of a better example than Bryan Johnson, who is very trying to get a way to live longer by undergoing a procedure called genetics therapy. And his eternal life program often seems very extreme and controversial to a lot of people. As an insider, how do you view his approach and what do you think we can learn from his effort?
Well, I think that Bryan's doing a really good job of explaining to the broad population that aging is something that is controllable. We say aging is plastic. So this plasticity associated with aging means that if I decide to exercise more, I change my nutrition, I sleep better, I am going to be reducing my pace of age. I'm going to be reducing the damage that I'm doing to my body.
Yeah.
And we are accumulation of damage. As you know, health span starts really at the point of birth and maybe even earlier, because obviously our lifestyle is an absolute dictator as to how the rest of our life is going to go. Do we live in a polluted area? Do I live in a stressful household?
Yeah.
Do I have a stressful career? Do I have a large manual labor element to my role? These are all very important things that contribute ultimately to understanding what our mortality is and what our health span is. Now, Bryan's doing a very good job of explaining to a very broad audience through social media and the work that he's doing that the ability to control the rate of age and control your health span is something that you can do as a regular human being, you know. And he's a controversial character. I've met Bryan a few times. We've had some very great conversations. He's a very intelligent guy. He knows what he's doing, and he knows exactly what he's doing in the way that he's approaching social media as well. So some people in the industry think that it's a bad thing. Other people think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. But of course, he represents a tribe of thinking, right? So people that are wanting to just eat vegetables, or people that are looking to do the exercise that they do, or start to experiment with therapies, whether they're gene therapies or whatever they are doing, maybe in an offshore, unregulated environment. And Bryan's representative of some of the extremes of what's possible out there. He's building his own tribe, which is very interesting. It's not the only tribe in longevity, though.
So you also reckon it's a little bit extreme, but I heard that you go a little bit extreme with your own exercising style as well.
Yes, I used to. I don't anymore. I'm kind of an alpha personality, you know, so I tend to throw myself into things. And yes, I discovered that I had an ambition to do quite long endurance swims and bike rides. My first go at this was cycling from one end of the UK to the other. So it's a very established route. It's called Land's End to John O'Groats. So you go from the tip of Cornwall to the tip of Scotland. And we did about 100 miles a day. It was something that you trained up to, and it was great fun, you know, and I really enjoyed the experience. So after that, I decided that I was going to spend more time every year challenging myself doing different swims and different cycle rides.
Wow, that's fascinating. But you did 500 kilometers in 24 hours.
Yeah, that's right. I can't run because I damaged my knee when I was a child. So I can do cycling and I can do swimming. So I used to do different things. And I did a cycle ride along the Pyrenees in Spain and France. That was from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. And we had to do it in 100 hours, including sleep. It was brutal. I have to say that was something that really I felt changed my body, because I pushed myself so far that the next year when I did my big bike ride for 500k, that was in Norway, I got ill after that. And I developed traditional kind of flu symptoms that people get. But the problem is that they never went away.
Yeah.
So I then got diagnosed with chronic fatigue, ME, people call it long COVID now, but it's basically the same autoimmune system disease where your body just doesn't really have a good response to exercise. So now I'm glad to say that after 5 years, I'm back up to a level of exercise, but nowhere near what I was able to do. So if I can swim for half an hour, I'm really happy.
And this actually reminded me that I noticed something. The old generation often engage in a higher levels of physical activity compared to the young ones. As young people, especially if they're in the early 20s, they care less about longevity. Whereas I go to the gym, I notice that people in their 40s or 50s, they perform better compared to people that are very young. I'll show you an example. The coach will initially assume I have a high level of physical performance. He would set the expectation very high. However, he would quickly adjust it once he noticed I could not catch up with the rest of the class.
Right.
So by the third time he actually came around, this guy next to me, he's at probably at his 50s, he was chilling on the highest speed while I was like tired as a dog. So what's your take when you see younger generations tend to stay glued to their chairs all the time, and how do you think people need the longevity when it's requiring sacrificing their pleasure from a young age?
Yeah, well, I guess the human body is amazing. What you can do over a period of time as you build and train is incredible, right?
Yeah.
So if you stick at your cycle class, then 12 months from now, you'll be very different to where you were 6 months ago, right? So as people get older, and this is awareness that's coming through media and blogs and podcasts and all these things that people are reading and hearing. Okay, well, maybe I should exercise more, or maybe I should take a cold shower every day. These are things that people, once they become aware of these things and they start to feel the benefit from it, then of course it becomes compulsive, right? Mm-hmm. So there are people in that class that you're in that really, really look forward to that class because they know that they're going to leave that class, A, maintaining their body to a higher level, B, that they've had a really, really good time, and C, that they've had a social engagement with other people, because sports, and whether it's individual sports or team sports, is a really important part for people to be able to engage with other humans, right? So camaraderie, not being lonely, all of those things become actually more important, I think, as you get older.
Yeah.
Because, as you get older, people move away from your friendship base and it's harder to make new friends, whereas you're younger, you've just come out of university, you've got a new job, everybody's taking you to parties, so you can tend to be less focused on your own health and well-being, right? So my daughter is 21. She's having a great time. She's not really interested in exercise.
No,
so
she's going out for drinks every week.
Yeah, so the thing is that what she needs to do is establish at a point in her life when she feels, okay, now I need to start taking things a bit more seriously, that she would re-engage with her own health and well-being. And I think this is a problem for people that don't engage in sport at school and carry that through after school. When you drop sport at school, after school, it's very hard to pick it up again unless you're very motivated to do so. And when you look at any population, there's about 35% of any population that do absolutely nothing. They drink alcohol, they eat pizza, they sit and watch TV, and they don't motivate themselves to do anything. That is a hardcore of every population that is very difficult for governments to motivate into, obviously, their own health and well-being, and they become a burden to their societies later. And that's part of the longevity industry's agenda, which is to try and help these national populations get healthier.
Yeah, because I remember when I was a bit younger, one aspect I want to have fun, and another aspect I'm very aware of the side that I need to think about longevity. So, which I think it's very similar to a lot of people in their young age, because they could have a granular yogurt in the morning and a salad for lunch and probably 4 shots of vodka for dinner, and we call that a balance. Yeah. So it's very challenging because actually we have two thoughts of fighting with each other.
That's right. When I got ill, I went to a nutritionist, and the nutritionist created a metabolic type for me and identified that I am a classic omnivore. I should be eating meat, fish, all of those things. Now, I have been vegetarian since I was 16. So over 35 years, I spent my whole life being a vegetarian, pushing myself in business, pushing myself physically on the wrong fuel. Information that I got from my nutritionist said, okay, well, you're going to have to change your protein intake. So I changed my protein, which has helped me recover some of my health problems. But again, if you're eating granola for breakfast or salads for your lunch, that might not be the right fuel for your body. You could be accumulating that damage now, right? So knowledge is power. And whether it's drinking too much alcohol, I still enjoy drinking, but I do know that I need to take it down because my Whoop band tells me exactly the data that I've had a bad night's sleep, because if I've drunk too much alcohol, then I'm going to wake up feeling fatigued and then I'm going to have a bad day.
I'm just asking for the young generations. The real problem is, how do you stick with that longevity in your mind for a long period of time?
Yeah, well, I guess that when you're young, you're not really thinking about your later years. You're just enjoying life.
I do. Right? People do. Yeah, it's just difficult to keep it in a long period.
Yeah, so I think that it's all about having the information to make the right choices.
Yeah.
So there are so many wearables now that are out there. There's so much guidance that's out there. Yeah. We all know what to do. And if we do the right things, then we do ultimately feel the benefit of doing so.
Right.
So you've got to balance social, you've got to balance your diet, you've got to balance your career. All of those things need to come into play. And individuals need to make their own choices, okay? And there are 35% of every population where they decide to make pretty bad choices, you know. So the good news is that there's 65% of every population that's engaged with their own health and well-being, which is a really good thing.
And probably only 10% can stay very, very self-disciplined.
Possibly so, yeah. I mean, interestingly, our readership for Longevity.Technology, the main group of people that read are millennial, okay? So it's not people that are Gen Xers like me or boomers who are older. It's younger people that are, you know, they've got kids, they've got careers, they're probably looking after their own health and well-being, and they're very engaged in this whole subject matter.
Is it also part of your company values?
Yeah, I mean, the readership has come through the readership, right? So we put our news and our content out there. What people read and what they engage with is completely their choice. Now, we don't specifically target content at any particular demographic, but I was very surprised that we had a much younger readership than I thought we had, which is great. And
what are the major technical breakthroughs in longevity market at the moment?
I think that we talked already about people's realization that aging is plastic, right? So wearables, information for consumers, supplements, dietary interventions, now that people used to talk about wellness, okay, but now they've moved from wellness to health span and longevity. So that's definitely number one. Number two is the diagnostics and measurement of age, which is still very early as an industry. But this is something that people are now very much aware of. The difference between chronological age and biological age is a very interesting dynamic for an industry to baseline its success on, okay? And that to me is very, very important. Everything that we do is going to be based upon the diagnostics and measurement of the success that we're creating within clients, humans, patients, or whatever. And then, of course, there's the biotech sphere. So biotech is going to change the world, right? So longevity biotech is going to be really the starting point of humans being able to understand that death is something that's going to come to everybody. Some people talk about immortality, and we can talk about that today, no problem. I'm not so fixated on living forever, but I want to live a long and healthy life for as long as possible. So if I can live to 120 or I can live to 150, it might not be my generation that benefits from the technologies that are being developed now. It might be my children's generation that benefit from that. But the way that humans live, and you tie into human longevity space and what's happening in the space industry, you tie that into population decline, you can see that actually human longevity is going to become a very, very integral part of the expansion of humankind. And people are starting to realize that now. We've still got a long way to go. But these biotech companies that are working in the lab now, not just on mice, they're working on humans now. They're moving closer towards market-ready products. Those are the companies that are going to change the world. And they're very much part of the longevity sphere as well.
Right. Can you please give me an example of the most trending or most cutting-edge technology right now?
So cellular reprogramming is something that's very, very interesting. And they are still working in mice, okay? So this isn't in human now, but this is a concept of being able to take a human cell, whatever type of cell it may be, and rewinding its age to the point where it still has its cellular identity. So the cell will still know what it is, whether it's a brain cell, a heart cell, a cartilage cell, or whatever it may be. Now, this is still working at a very early clinical stage. So conceptually, this is nowhere near being experimented with in humans, but it's going to happen at some point in the future once it's proven to be safe. And this is the concept where you will be able to initially focus on a specific organ, right? So we talked about my brain age being 30. There are other organs in my body that are the same age as me chronologically. So really you are as old as your youngest organ, right? So in many respects, if my youngest organ is 30, that's great. But if my oldest organ is 56, then effectively I'm still geared to that most important organ being 56, right? If it's possible to take that organ, whether it's my heart, my liver, or whatever it may be, and target cellular reprogramming on that organ to rewind it back to a younger state, that is really where the first wave of the technology is going to be focused. It's targeted on specific organs. But in the future, the concept will be to target every organ and every cell in the body, to rejuvenate every cell in the body. And that conceptually is where you would be in a future where you can have a therapy in your body, whether it's through an IV drip or a program of injections or whatever it may be, where you're going to be in a position where you can rewind the clock on every cell in your body. So that's the concept of being able to stay, let's say you're 35 and you want to stay at 35, there will be therapeutics in the future that can keep you at 35. Then the concept is, if you're 56 and you want to be 35, can you rewind those cells back to a younger state, but still keep the cellular identity associated with that process that those cells are being put through? And that's really where a lot of the people in the industry are truly focused, because of course we have lots of very strong arguments for the longevity industry about helping people live to their exact chronological age trajectory, but live healthily, so that you don't have morbidity when you're in your 70s, for example, and live 20 years in ill health. So that's a very solid argument for what's happening in the industry today, right? I mean, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
But a lot of people are focused on the future of being able to rewind the cellular age across a whole human body, and that's very exciting. And it's a long way away, but it's going to be something that will happen in the future.
So when you get old, you just implant a new organ. So basically you don't get old.
So that's a different subject. That's a concept of keeping your body alive so that you can be available, still alive, for when these technologies become available. So there are people that are looking at organ transplantation, obviously as a key part of ensuring that your body, your metabolic system is completely operational. If you've still got your brain function, but your body's failing, then of course there's the concepts now of having a new body. So this is pretty extreme science, okay? There are a small amount of companies that are now working in this domain of being able to keep the human body to the point where if it fails, that you can replace those organs and maybe even replace a whole body.
So ideally, how does cellular reprogramming could applicate to human being?
Well, it's first of all, it's that if you do have a heart condition, what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to identify that somebody's going to have a heart condition in the future. So you can do that through testing. People are working on this now so that you're in a position where you can say, okay, this person that's in their 40s, they have a trajectory for cardiovascular disease.
Right.
So there's the potential now of being able to stop cardiovascular disease at a much earlier stage before it becomes a problem. But if somebody does have a heart condition, at the moment now they're looking at cellular reprogramming to help with certain muscles around the heart. You can target reprogram cells to a particular heart muscle or part of the heart wall or whatever it may be, to be able to ensure that that heart stays as optimal as it possibly can be. This is the first stage of cellular reprogramming. So you've got targeted cellular reprogramming on a specific organ or a part of a specific organ. The future will then move to organs themselves. Maybe you have the potential of a heart that is diseased, to be able to take that heart and rewind that heart back to a younger state. About it's conceptual. The thing that is not conceptual is to be able to take parts of a human heart and reprogram the cells to ensure that that heart stays as optimal as it possibly can be. And there are people that are working on that right now. But the concept of having a whole human body that's got a younger cellular state across the whole body, that is a long way away at the moment.
Decades?
Well, I asked somebody at a conference the other day who's doing this on mouse studies, and I asked the question of this expert, how long will it be until it's in humans? He said, I don't know. I don't know either, but it's still decades away.
Well, I hope that day comes soon. So the cost of a treatment and longevity is often not covered by the health insurance. And they could be ranging from 25K to 100K US dollars annually. Despite this, the number of participants in the game of rich is increasing at least 50% per year. So do you think this is a game only for the rich?
At the moment, unfortunately, yes, it is. But that's going to be, it's a bit like anything, right? So it's a bit like, let's say Tesla, right? So Teslas now are available for everybody. When Teslas came out, they weren't available for everybody from a price point perspective. Now, you've got, I would say, globally, you've got the 0.1%, which is the super, super rich, okay? You've got the 1%.
They got Elon Musk and Bryan Johnson.
Yep, so people that can afford anything they want, okay? So they are being serviced by high-end clinics. As these longevity clinics are emerging, like anything in an emerging industry, they're working on industry standards, they're working on training clinicians, pipeline of clinicians to come through and start thinking about longevity as opposed to just being a cardiologist or whatever. And you can see now that this is an industry that is building standards, it's got clients, and it is executing therapies that are cascading from the 0.1% to the 1% to the 10%. Interestingly, what's also happening is you can start to see in places like Singapore and Israel that the therapeutics that are being employed in private clinics are now starting to become available in public clinics, in public healthcare systems. So you can see that governments are looking at their populations. I mentioned the 35% of these people that don't do anything.
Right.
Okay, this is where drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic are starting to come into the frame, where governments are saying, look, okay, we have an obesity problem. This obesity problem is going to lead to chronic diseases, multiple chronic diseases of these people. So we need to help these people lose weight, and we need to help these people stay healthy longer, right? So that's where you're starting to see state intervention with drugs now to help people with their lifestyle diseases. So that's a revolution that's starting to happen. Pharmaceutical companies that are now becoming aware that there is a multi-billion opportunity in preventative therapeutics, not therapeutics that fix diseases, but therapeutics that prevent diseases from happening in the first place.
All right.
And that's what longevity effectively is, okay?
Yeah.
So coming back to these clinics and the 1%, they are deploying gene therapies, stem cell therapies, therapeutics, lifestyle choices, hyperbaric chambers, cryotherapies, these types of things that are proving now that people can stay younger and they can rewind their biological age to a younger state. And that's all about measurement, as I mentioned earlier, because measurement is not a gold standard yet. So a lot of this is still interpretive, okay? But you can see that these clinics are now creating an awareness in the same way that Bryan Johnson is creating an awareness that it's possible at a clinical level to help people stay younger, healthier and fitter for longer. So yes, we're benefiting from the super rich at the moment, but that'll have a cascade effect down through every society.
What can people do with an average income, and how can they improve their longevity and well-being?
So they can start with knowledge. We have an app that we are going to be promoting more heavily as a company. So we have a Longevity.Technology system, and this is an app that costs just over $300. It's a DNA test, and it's an epigenetic DNA test. So you get an age marker, and you get your trajectory for aging diseases, but you also get a baseline of all of your inherited disease traits as well.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting example. I and my wife, we sat next to each other, we had the app open, and we were comparing notes about dietary guidance and exercise guidance. And these are all things that are available. It's not just available from us, there are other companies doing it as well. So average people can get information, whether it's through wearables or through epigenetic DNA tests. They can get better insights into their general health and well-being, and then they can get guidance on how to improve that. So that's what everybody can do right away now. And that's a big part of the longevity industry.
It sounds very valuable and just get through by 300 USD.
Yeah, it's information, as I mentioned earlier. Here's a lot of complicated information, but actually these are the things that you need to do. We all know we need to exercise. We all know we need to sleep better. We all know we need to drink less. But if you can actually execute those things and then start to see the benefit of them, not just in the way you feel, but you've actually got data that is showing that you're bringing down your biological age, or you are getting healthier, your sleep is improving, that is a self-perpetuating feedback loop. I'm actually seeing the benefit of the things that I'm doing, and that's very empowering.
Can you please break it down into details, like what are parameters that we can get from this tab?
Well, let me talk about myself personally. That's probably
Right.
the easiest thing, right? So I am sleep obsessed now because I need at least 8 hours sleep to perform. And if I get 7.5 hours, I feel disappointed. So sleep is really empowering to me. I'm British. So the British are pretty well known for their alcohol consumption. I am really dialing down my alcohol consumption. So I still drink, but I drink a lot less. So I maybe would take drinks once, maybe twice a week. And I can see the benefit from that, obviously, as well. How I wake up in the morning and how I feel. So with my diet, as I mentioned earlier, I've changed my diet. My chronic fatigue issues that I had, they went from very bad to moderate, okay, just by changing my diet. So I take supplements. We, as a company, are bringing out our own supplements line because I can see that supplements move the needle for people as well. And what you want to be in a position of doing is understanding what's working and not working for you. So when you look at our test, for example, it will tell you what vitamins you're deficient in and what vitamins you should be taking and what vitamins that you may be taking that you shouldn't really be bothering to take. So that's all very powerful information that you can start to build a program of work for yourself as an individual. It's a little bit like a coach, you know, like a health coach in your pocket, but it's a starting point. It's a consumer grade product. And we talked earlier about clinics. So yes, we all need actually to be able to go to see somebody and somebody's going to say to you, okay, you know, Yuan, so you've got all of these results. You're doing not enough of this. You should do more of this. Try doing this. Try this, and maybe this will work, right? Come back and see me in 6 months' time. And you want to be in a position where you're sent away. You've got your instructions. You come back in 6 months' time. You've got a series of tests that you've taken at the beginning and a series of tests that you're taking now, and you'll know whether you've moved the needle or not. And that's what's very important. This is very complicated science. So this is why there are so few clinics in the world, because it's a new area of science, but it's growing. And I've been to some wonderful longevity clinics. They've identified health issues in me that I didn't know I had. And I'm very lucky that I'm in the position where I can experience these things. That information is something that you as a human being can go and action, but we all need guidance, right? So longevity clinicians are really the most important pivot point for this industry. And it's not just longevity clinicians, it's also traditional doctors that are starting to move into longevity thinking. And that's what's slowly happening.
I see.
So this industry is still early, okay? I mean, I'm very excited. This year's been amazing. This is 2024. It feels like longevity is broken. And that's a result of the science coming through. It's a result of publicity. You can't open a Sunday paper without reading somebody's story about their wellness or their longevity. We've got Bryan Johnson doing what he's doing, Kim Kardashian doing what she's doing. So the awareness is out there. And that means that the industry is starting to grow. And that's very exciting, but it's still got a long way to go. So it's a bit, this feels like to me, the internet in the mid 1990s, okay? Where you could see the first movers were making mistakes, but first movers were also getting traction. And this is what's happening now in longevity. So give this 10 years, this will be an incredible industry.
So if I enter this field right now, my net worth could be skyrocketing in a 10 years of time?
Yes, but you have to get in quick, right? Because everybody is starting to come in. That's why this year is a very interesting year. I mean, we analyze the industry, we analyze in our research team the companies that are part of the longevity industry.
Yeah.
Now, there are 1,300 companies in longevity across different domains, whether it's biomarker tests or cellular reprogramming, whatever, right? So there are 25 different domains of longevity that we analyze. But there are more and more companies every year coming into the space. There is more investment coming into the space. So when you start to read about things in the newspaper, sometimes it's too late. You know, sometimes those people have already made the industry and have made their first moves, are going to be successful. Now, the industry space is so wide that there's still a great opportunity to come into longevity and make a fortune. But we've got to be very careful about, as an industry, people that come in and spoil it for everybody else. Okay, so that's a big risk in the industry. And every industry as it grows needs standards, it needs industry bodies to set standards and to police those standards. And again, it hasn't happened yet, but it is starting to happen.
So that's why we should subscribe Longevity.Technology to get the first-hand information.
Yeah, I mean, we not only research information, but we get information coming to us now. People know that we are the industry voice, and therefore, if they want to tell the industry about what they're doing, they come to us, and then we cover it as a news article, and then it gets out to the industry. And it's taken 6 years to get to this point. And we've got a great brand, we've got great readership, and we've got great influence in the industry, but we're only just starting. So we've got a long way to go still.
And how do you collaborate with all departments and make sure your subscribers get the first-hand information?
Well, we're only a small team, so we communicate all the time. We have a meeting once a week where we review the news that's coming. So we get information in different ways. So obviously there's a lot of scientific papers that are being published. So we look at those and go, okay, that's interesting. Let's run an article on a scientific discovery. We analyze investments that are happening. So if a company gets funded, we kind of go, oh, that's interesting. So let's tell everybody about that. So we are tracking what's happening in the spaces of scientific discovery, in investment, and to a degree policy that's happening, and bring that to our audience. The good news is that people tell us information before they're going to launch it, which is great because that tells us that we're a trusted resource. So we get news under what's called embargo. So we get told things before the date of launch, which means that we can prepare for that, and we can interview the CEO or the head of the scientific team, and then prepare. And then when the embargo lifts, we can then publish at the same time that everybody else does. And then there are other things where, because I'm very wired into the industry and networking with people tell me things that I need to know, but aren't anywhere near being ready for publicity. I talk with people about scientific discoveries. I talk with people about mergers and acquisitions. I understand when people are moving into an area where their authority is being questioned. So there's all things that I get inside track on, and
And speaking of that, one of the most leading companies in this world in the longevity field is Altos Lab. Could you please give us some spoiler? What things they're doing?
Well, the thing is, I can't. Because Altos Lab is very opaque, okay? So they were preceded by a company called Calico. They're not corporately related, but Calico was a company that was funded with a lot of money. And again, they did what Altos did, was attracted a lot of the best scientists and the best brains in the industry. And not very much came out of Calico. Calico is still operational, but it's still very opaque and very discreet about what it's doing, and it doesn't really show much progress. And Altos is the same. It's very well funded. It's got over 4 billion of investment in the business. Some of the best brains in the industry work for it. And there has been some social media footage to demonstrate that they have been doing mouse studies that are demonstrating cellular reprogramming benefits, which is what we talked about earlier. But the interesting thing is Altos Labs doesn't like to be talked about as being a longevity business. They are much in the domain of preventative health. So Altos is a very interesting company. They're going to do some great things. I have no doubt about that. But it's very difficult for anybody to know what's going on there.
Let's get back to the topic that which you don't have any restrictions. So talking about the DNA test, how the test process was like? Do you just take my blood or?
It's saliva-based. It's been used by over 40,000 people. So there's a large cohort of people whose DNA has been analysed anonymously in the data sets. And because people are asked a questionnaire as they register their kit and onboard themselves with the app, we will know whether people have got specific health traits. So, for example, somebody might report that they have lower back pain, or they might indicate that they've got mild cognitive impairment. So anonymously, we will know the DNA results of those people. So we can look at the DNA of people that have got mild cognitive impairment and understand what clusters there are around their DNA, the CPG sites, to understand whether there is a propensity around people that are presenting the results from those CPG sites. So that helps to reinforce, it's a feedback loop to reinforce the data of the results that the app provides individuals. We work with a company called Mudo, which has got a very valid test base, and it's processed by Eurofins, which is an international laboratory, and there are others in the space as well. And the concept of DNA methylation is something where I feel there is no industry standard at the moment. So that's a very important thing that we should say. But I also think it's very important about having data to be able to push against. Okay, so I've just done our test recently, and the test has put me older, slightly older than my chronological years. Now, I've had a true diagnostic test that's maybe 8 years younger. So it can show you that 2 different methylation tests are giving you completely different results. But my test was 3 years ago, nearly. And I've just done my test with our system, but I've been traveling a lot. I've been not exercising as much as I would normally, and I've been under a lot of stress. And it may well be that my methylation results have moved to the point where I've actually become chronologically older than my years, only by a fraction. And I've gone, oh, this is not good. So what am I doing? That's meaning that I'm getting the result where I was younger before and I'm now older. So I'm going to test again in 6 months' time. I'm definitely going to sleep better. I've started to take afternoon naps for 15, 20 minutes just to recharge my body. I'm drinking less, I'm exercising more, and we'll maybe see that I've dropped that down again. And that's the plasticity of aging that you get with these results. How accurate these results are, this is a natural process that the industry is going through. And I would say that biomarker tests that revolve around DNA methylation, they're probably at version 2 now. And I don't believe we'll get to version 5 when the whole industry agrees on a common standard. It's going to go through an evolutionary process.
Our genetics data will be well protected?
Of course. Yeah. Yes, I mean, that's absolutely the most important thing. And when you go to different countries, there is different legislation that your data needs to be stored in your own country. So obviously making sure that data is protected, it's anonymized. We only have numbers, we don't have people's identities when we're looking at data. But of course, it's very important to make sure that that data is secure.
So you don't even know who the person is?
Correct, we don't. No, we understand when people register an account and they download the app and all those types of things, but we don't know individuals' data.
And this will not be used in any other field?
No, because at the end of the day, what you've got is you're on your own personal journey, but as the cohort of users grows, you can start to see in anonymous data the trends that are happening. Now, if I was in a position, I would have every citizen in a country take the same test to understand at a population level whether that country is statistically older or younger. Okay. Now, I would put money on the fact that the UK would be statistically older because of a lot of the lifestyles that we have in this country. But maybe if I went to Japan or South Korea or Finland, you might get a different population level of result. And I feel that this is where the scientific community are now looking at these technologies and starting to understand, are these indicators of national health? And that's really what's starting to happen now in the space.
I see. Because lots of big companies whereas they asserted themselves as being very private or protective about the user's data, but actually they're secretly using it for other purpose behind the back. So, which make the users very difficult to believe in these companies right now.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I can't really comment on any particular companies. I can only comment on our own, where the data is absolutely anonymized and secure. But yes, and of course there are data breaches that happen. There are hackers out there. So you have to be in a position where you ensure that you run very robust, secure systems. And yes, you need to maintain them. And we've just seen recently that it takes a software glitch to change all of the travel programs of everybody around the world, right? So we live in a data age. People are becoming much more familiar with the fact that their data is being used. But companies that are using their data in a correct way, in an approved way, and with the compliance of their users is something that needs to be supported. And that's the way that we approach it.
Right. Speaking of longevity, a very popular market which is arising right now, especially in Asia, is probably weight losing. And speaking of weight losing, the liraglutides and semaglutides are the big part of it. Are these mature enough to be in the market?
Yes, I would say that they are, because the drugs, semaglutide, I can't remember the exact number, I think it's 57 years. So from first discovery to being an approved drug has taken 57 years, roughly, okay? Call it 50 years. It's still a long time. And when you're going through with a drug, okay, and this is a very important point to make, for any longevity biotech company, they still will have to go through the regulatory pathway, which means that you go through phase 1 trials, which is just to prove that it's safe, not whether it's efficacious, which means that does it actually have a benefit to the disease or the condition that you're looking to address. So any drug goes through phase 1, it then goes through phase 2, and there are different phases, 2A and 2B, where you're now looking at larger populations of people, and you're also looking at the efficiency. And when you get to the bridge between phase 2 and phase 3, you then need to go into a much larger population to test it on many more people. It's riskier because you do run the risk still of the drug failing in phase 3, and you need hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to do that. So what you're seeing is that you've got longevity biotech companies that are now getting to the point where they are approaching the end of phase 2 and moving into phase 3, where they are going to need to partner with big pharma companies, or they're going to IPO to raise a lot of capital to take their own drug through to phase 3. And I'm taking you off subject, but the reality is that semaglutide has been through all of those phases, okay? And it's now successfully in the market. Now, is it being used for the right things? That's the next question, okay? So there's a big grey market, as you're probably aware. So there are people that are wanting to use Ozempic as a weight loss drug, and they don't necessarily have pre-diabetes, or they're not moving into a diabetic state. They just want to lose weight. Now, that is an approved drug that's being used off-label. So that's okay. It's becoming accepted now by people. And this is a very interesting segue to the way that longevity therapeutics will happen in the future. So people get very fixated on classifying aging as a disease. I personally don't believe that any regulator is going to classify aging as a disease. However, any drug that is used through working on the aging pathways is going to affect any one of the health conditions that coding exists for. Now, what's interesting, of course, is Wegovy, more familiar with now, Ozempic, the skinny jab, that is focused on weight loss, but it does have a benefit of it's cardioprotective, so there's less strain on the metabolism, which means that the heart is healthier. And it is also now proven in retrospective human studies that it is also neuroprotective. So it is also helping people maintain their cognitive health. So you've really got kind of like a longevity drug, even though at the moment it's targeted at weight loss, because it's picking off 3 diseases of aging. Now, it may have beneficial effect in other areas as well. So what we're seeing really is that people are using it for weight loss, but actually it has got a massive beneficial effect as an aging therapeutic as well. So I'm very excited about this, because this is the confidence that investors are going to need to have to say, oh, okay, so this drug that you want to get from phase 2 to phase 3, actually, if you now look at the success of Novo Nordisk, which is Europe's most valuable company now, they've gone from being not that valuable to the value that they have now, and that's a trajectory for any longevity biotech therapeutic. The question is do you stay as an individual company and IPO and go yourself, or do you sell to a pharmaceutical company, let the pharmaceutical company take it forward? So the point really is that this is the beginning of the revolution. So this is the beginning of using drugs as preventative lifestyle therapies, which is something that longevity ultimately is going to be.
The reason why I bring it up is if the teenagers, they know the existence of a skinny jab, which they can just inject into their body and lose appetite, they might have overuse or misuse it. So probably that's also the problem the parents are concerned about.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the parents will be concerned about perhaps them taking their drugs as much as they will be about how much time they're spending on social media. You've now got grey market products that are now black market products. So you've got counterfeit drugs pretending to be Ozempic coming into the market as well. So you have all of those risks. So the question is, how do regulators manage that? And it comes down to border control, it comes down to drug administration, and of course it comes down to perhaps making these drugs more cheaper and more widely available to people in a controlled environment rather than in a grey or black market. But yes, I mean, that is going to be a concern for people. And that's what's happening, of course. Social media is very powerful. It has driven the share price of Novo Nordisk, not because it's just being used as a therapeutic in the right therapeutic application, but of course it's exciting for investors. They're seeing the growth of this as a new category of drug.
Of course.
It's very interesting.
So what are the worst side effects it could bring?
Well, I'm no expert, but the issue that people are concerned about is muscle loss. Obviously, you're losing weight, but also you might be losing muscle. It's bad if you're losing muscle, right? Because really, at the end of the day, you need those muscles for your mobility, and you're going to really need those muscles as you get older, okay? So there are, interestingly, longevity biotech companies that are working on a disease area called sarcopenia. So when you past your 50s, you lose 2% of your muscle mass every year. So as you get older, you're going to get frailer and you're going to get thinner and you're going to get smaller, as my mother has done. So that's a result of age, and sarcopenia is one of those diseases that people get. So the companies that are working on sarcopenia, they're now working with what I call the Ozempic aftermarket, which is helping ensure that therapeutically people lose weight, but they don't lose muscle. And that's a big area which the industry is going to be focused on, not only from a clinical perspective, but it's also a solution where people are going to make money.
When it comes to weight losing, do you recommend a more natural way, for example, like fasting?
Fasting's great. In our DNA test, my results are that I am a yo-yo dieter. So I can put weight on and I can take weight off very quickly. That's just my metabolism that does that. So fasting is probably one of the most proven ways to not only extend human life, but obviously if you're taking on fewer calories, you're going to be in a position where you're going to start losing weight. Okay, so fasting's great, both from a metabolism perspective as well as from a longevity perspective. It's tough though, so you've got to find the right fasting regime for you. I tried a 5-day fast using a fasting mimicking diet, which meant that I could still take on a certain amount of food, although low calorie food, that wouldn't affect the fasting benefit. That's from a company called El Nutra. They've got this product called Prolon. That was very good. I managed to do 5 days and I would have got the benefit from that. You don't feel the benefit from it, but it is proven clinically that it will give you that benefit in the long term. It's pretty miserable at the time though, sometimes when you're fasting. My fasting regime is if I wake up in the morning and my Whoop results are good, I've had a good night's sleep, I'm in the green, and I don't feel hungry, I won't eat until lunchtime.
I think it's a very personal thing as well. For each person, I think it's different. For example, myself, the most extreme diet I've ever done is probably keto diet. I did not see a significant change when I did it, probably only like 1 month, 2 months, not too long, because I noticed there were minor problem of my body. So right now I'm just pretty relaxed. So I listen to my body. I don't eat too much. I probably eat only 2 meals a day.
Okay.
But I only eat when I feel hungry.
That's good, yeah. Everybody needs to have a good balance of protein, carbs, fruit and vegetables. Yeah. And of course, if you're controlling the fuel coming on board and you can survive and operate and function on less fuel, you're going to lose some weight. If you want to do that, that's a good thing.
Do you think it's good that we just listen to our body and eat only when the body tells us what to eat, or we should just stick on to a diet plan and execute it daily?
I think too few people listen to their body. And I learned through my chronic fatigue that if I wanted to exercise, I got my swimming shorts on and I've got my bag packed, but I feel exhausted, then I shouldn't go to the swimming pool because, I'm going to make myself feel even worse later in the day. So listening to your body is completely valid. Likewise, you have data points, whether it's your wearables, that's going to help you. I think that fasting is something that is incredibly personal, and I do it when I feel I'm able to do it. So if I skip a meal, that's great. Fewer calories, I'm still operational. Other people go, right, I'm going to go in the tunnel, I'm going to do 3 days, water only, and they're capable of doing it. I personally couldn't do that.
From an investor perspective, what is the most market growth potential in this age?
Well, again, it depends on what type of investor you're looking at. If you're a investor that works in consumer products, then I would be absolutely investing in supplement companies, I'd be investing in biomarker companies, I'd be investing in companies that are creating ingredients that are going to be proven to have human benefits that can then be in supermarket products, okay? And that's happening now. There are companies that are developing ingredients that will go forward into regular chew bars, spreads, cereals, those types of things.
The thing is, there are too many biomedical supplements company there are in the current market. As a customer, how do we choose the right products for us?
You need clinical evidence. We're bringing out our own supplements line. A lot of the ingredients in our supplements are based on clinical studies that are not always done in humans. But each product has got a marquee ingredient from key manufacturers. I can't tell you who they are at the moment, but each of those has got human data to support the claims that are being made. And I feel that's very important, whether it's one of our products or whether you're working with your own products in the marketplace or the choices you're making. You really need to dig in and look at the evidence. And really what you should remember is that just because somebody else is taking a supplement, you can't guarantee that there's going to be a supplement that's going to benefit you.
So the epigenetics test is going to be very helpful?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody should have information to make informed choices. But to come back to your point that you asked me, which is in relation to what should investors be looking at, if it's a consumer investor, then there's a whole consumer marketplace out there in longevity to invest in. If you're a biotech investor, there are biotech companies. There are very different types of investors in those two different fields. One of the things I'm very interested in at the moment is what I would call longevity real estate, which is where you've got new luxury destinations, whether they are hotels or resorts, hotels that are converting themselves into being wellness centers and longevity centers. This whole concept of medical tourism is now moving into luxury and longevity tourism, and I'm very interested in that. I don't know enough about it, but I feel that there's a lot of money going into that.
I can already see a lot of millionaires and billionaires become a client of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to look at somewhere like Dubai, and there's a lot of investment going into new clinics and new real estate. So that's something I'm interested in.
Do you think it's going to become a trend for the next 5 to 10 years?
I believe this will become a very important addition to the overall wellness industry as a new category on the wellness industry. So in the same way that, let's call it, the fitness industry is part of the wellness industry, I can see that longevity will not only become its own category, but it will become one of the biggest industries in the world.
And what's your vision about longevity technology in the next 5 to 10 years?
So we're going to be part of it. My business is built so far on reputation, quality of product, quality of network, and knowledge. We need to stay hungry and we need to stay in the front of the industry. And if we can do that, then we will be building not only a strong media brand, but also a strong brand that works in other areas. So we're working in not only business education, we're also working in business data. We're working in consumer information and consumer knowledge, where we're now going to be moving into consumer products. We are also going to have our own investment business because we've got data and knowledge that can be applied into a venture capital fund. So those are 5 diverse parts of one business under one brand. So I'm going to work on those, and my natural inclination is to try and find others, but I'm going to keep it to those 5. And if I can do a good job of getting investor returns for my current investors and my future investors 5 to 10 years from now, I'm sure that we'll be acquired by a much bigger company.
Okay, fantastic. And moving back to the supplements that you're going to launch, what's the name of it?
So they're all under the Longevity.Technology brand, and we're keeping the naming very simple. So we have longevity, cognition, muscle, multivitamin. So those are the 4 brands sitting underneath Longevity.Technology.
And when do you plan to launch it and where?
USA is our primary market, and that's our first market. So we're going to be geographically locked to working just in the USA, and we plan to be ready in September 2024.
Fantastic.
Very excited about it.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Phil. I'm looking forward to it. And everybody stay tuned with Longevity Technology. See you.